There are places, cursed by what has been worn, where a white dress can be a symbol of purity, but also a sign of grievance. Do you believe that a soul can be bound to an outfit and use it to return, spreading fear and seeking revenge? Welcome to Whisper Horror Channel, where we tell stories in which the truth is more terrifying than the legend. And today, we will embark on the journey of the debt walker, the one who carries the debt. A solitary man, tormented by his past, always searching for unresolved grievances to lessen the burden on his soul. Listen closely, because every footstep in the night might be a call from the dead. Gabriel stepped down from the old bus, the dry sound of the door echoing in the damp afternoon. The vehicle drove away, leaving behind a thin trail of dust and the smell of machine oil lingering in the thick air. He stood silently on the small dirt road, flanked by ancient oak trees, covered in moss like moss-colored curtains draped from the sky. There were no welcoming signs, no car horns, only the wind rustling through the branches and the pungent smell of decaying grass. West Louisiana Parish was not in any of his plans. But Gabriel never followed a map. He followed a vague feeling in his chest. Not intuition, nor prophecy. Simply, the emptiness inside Gabriel was only filled by journeys without destinations. The scar on his hand throbbed every time he stepped into a forgotten land. At a small street corner, he noticed a wooden sign hanging crookedly, Eloise Inn, Rest and Breakfast. It was a two-story house made of black wood, with a roof covered in old, green mossy tiles, looking like a fragment of memory refusing to dissolve into the present. Gabriel knocked on the door. A moment later, an old woman opened it. Her hair was white, her skin wrinkled like tree bark. She looked at him for a long time, as if trying to search for his face in her memory. Room 3. Upstairs. Facing the moss, she said, her voice whispering like wind through the partition. Gabriel nodded. He did not ask anything further. He was used to places like this, where time stood still and people lived as if they had nothing left to lose. The wooden hallway leading up to the second floor was warped like the spine of an old creature. Each of his steps created a creaking sound, like sighs stuck in the walls. Outside the hallway window, strands of moss hung down, swaying gently in the wind, stretching long like pale green fingers trying to touch him. Room 3 was small, just enough for a wooden bed, a desk, and an antique wardrobe. The air in the room smelled of dampness, mixed with the scent of decaying wood and old ashes. Gabriel sat down, opened his backpack, and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, where he recorded the incidents he had passed through, or rather, the debts he had carried. But strangely, the words, Myrtles Plantation, were already there. The page was stained, but the words were bold and clear as if written yesterday. Gabriel frowned. He did not remember recording it. Nor did he remember ever hearing that name. But the page was there. And his intuition knew that he should stay one more night. Gabriel sat silently by the slightly open window. The night wind filtered through the window pane, bringing the dampness of moss and mud, mingling with the quiet sound of the swamp stirring. On the ceiling, the fan rotated slowly, creaking like the breathing rhythm of some old creature falling asleep. The space in the room was not unusual, but that very fact made it suspicious. Too quiet, too still, as if this room had never truly left the past. Gabriel lay back on the creaking wooden bed, eyes half closed, but his mind could not rest. The musty scent in the room reminded him of an abandoned chapel, where prayers still lingered somewhere in the air, unable to transcend. Near midnight, the first sound echoed. Not from the hallway, not from the window, but from within the room itself. A faint sobbing sound, like a lament cut short in the throat. Gabriel opened his eyes. The room was pitch black. He did not turn on the light, only quietly sat up, listening. The crying was not loud, not clear, but it was real. It lingered somewhere near the wardrobe. Gabriel walked slowly toward the wardrobe, his hand lightly brushing the old wooden surface. Suddenly, a cold chill ran down his spine. There was nothing in the wardrobe. Only a stronger musty smell. And an atmosphere as if someone had just opened the door from the inside. He turned around, his eyes instinctively drawn to the window. And that was when he saw it. In the faint darkness of the backyard, among the swaying forest moss, there was a very small white streak, like a piece of silk hanging suspended, unaffected by the wind. Not pulled down by gravity. It stood still, looking at him. Gabriel did not blink. But when he moved closer to the window, the white streak disappeared. The oak trees were still there. The moss still hung down. But the white shadow was gone. And the crying also stopped. Gabriel clenched his hand, feeling the scar on his wrist throb. A sign he was too familiar with. But this time, he was unsure if it was a plea for help, or a warning. The next morning, the faint sunlight filtered through the thick curtains and the moss clinging to the window pane, casting a silent gray-green hue over the room. Gabriel woke up feeling unusually weary, as if he had walked through a heavy dream all night. He stood up, washed his face with cold water from the dripping faucet, then quietly opened the window. The view outside was the same, old oak trunks covered in moss, a dark swamp area in the distance, and the thick air smelling of dampness. But Gabriel's eyes stopped at one point, a gently swaying branch behind the inn, where he had seen the white streak last night. Something was caught on that oak branch. Gabriel went downstairs, crossing the small path between the knee-high grasses to get closer to the tree. The branch extended over a hollow, waterlogged piece of ground. When he approached, his shoes sank into the soft mud, making heavy squelching sounds. And then he saw it, a white fabric strip, like a piece of a wedding dress or an old nightgown. It was caught on the end of the branch, lightly fluttering in the wind. Gabriel reached out and removed it. The fabric was wet, cold, and smelled pungent like decaying moss mixed with something familiar, like old smoke and ash. As soon as he touched it, he felt a surge of cold electricity run through his arm. A flash of images crossed his mind, unclear, but a woman, long hair, face blurred in the weak light. She stood in a room full of mirrors, and behind her was an ancient oak tree. Exactly like this one. Gabriel stepped back, clutching the fabric in his hand. He returned to the room, opened his notebook and wrote the first line for this place. The white dress, a link? First intuition. Not a call. An exposed presence. After that, he opened his old map, a hand-drawn map recording areas where paranormal phenomena had occurred. When his eyes reached the area around Myrtles Plantation, where the name had coincidentally appeared in his notebook last night, something strange happened. On the surface of the map, a white smear appeared around the Myrtles Plantation area, as if someone had wet a piece of fabric and placed it on the map, leaving a faded stain, spreading little by little. Gabriel tried to wipe it away, but he couldn't. The stain seemed to be eating into the paper, like something that no longer wanted to be hidden. He looked down at the fabric still damp in his hand. The frayed threads were sticking out as if they had been torn in panic. There was no doubt anymore, it was once part of a dress. And it was not just material. It was holding something back. Gabriel stood silently for a long time. The space in the room seemed compressed. Outside the window, the sounds of frogs and insects also seemed to have fallen silent. In that moment, Gabriel did not think about exorcism or liberation. He only knew that he had been drawn in. Not by a spirit, but by forgotten memory struggling to find its way back. Gabriel remained seated at the table, the map spread out before him like a silent field. The white stain was still there, slowly, surely, as if breathing. From the central area of Myrtles Plantation, small lines like blood vessels began to spread out, touching nearby areas like St. Francisville, and extending to the nearby forest. But the strangest thing was, wherever the stain reached, the map paper there became icy cold to the touch. Gabriel lightly brushed his hand across it, feeling like he was touching a frozen water surface. He closed his eyes, concentrating. Not to hear the call, because no one had called him here, but to sense what was resisting oblivion. A word popped into his head, rebind. That whisper did not come from outside. It echoed from the memories he had witnessed, shared with lost souls. Gabriel never claimed to be an exorcist. He did not come to destroy. He came to rebind the cut threads, the unspoken grievances, the debts that had no one to bear them. The light in the room suddenly dimmed. Not because the light was weak, but because black clouds had rolled in, covering the Louisiana sky. Wind blew through the window, carrying a familiar smell, the smell of smoke and ashes. Gabriel stood up, walked to the window. It was not raining, but the air was damp like a funeral night that had not yet been cleaned up. He looked out at the backyard, where the white fabric strip had once fluttered on the oak branch. Now there was only moss and low fog, covering the ground like a layer of ancient breath. Then he returned to the table, folded the map, tucked the fabric piece between the pages of his notebook. Gabriel did not know what awaited him at Myrtles Plantation, but he was sure of one thing: this was not a coincidence. Something was stirring. Not a curse, nor exactly the presence of a single spirit, but an entire system of emotions that had not been buried. And Gabriel, as many times before, had unintentionally become the first witness. The Cromwell family arrived at Myrtles Plantation on a scorching late weekend afternoon, when Louisiana still retained some of the late summer heat. The silver SUV stopped on the gravel road in front of the old mansion. Leo Cromwell, a renowned psychologist in Houston, stepped out first, adjusted his thick glasses, and looked at the scene with the indifferent eyes of someone who had witnessed hundreds of cases of paranoia, psychosis, and hallucinations. Sarah, his wife, slowly opened the back door. Supporting their 15-year-old daughter, Emma, who was hugging a small embroidered pillow with the name Milo. Emma had a pale face, her large eyes always distracted as if listening to something else. Her hair was neatly tied to one side, her hand always gripping her backpack strap as if afraid of being pulled away. "It looks like we are stepping into a living museum," Sarah whispered, her eyes sweeping over the long porch and the dark wooden door of the mansion. The tall white columns, covered in vines, made Myrtles Plantation look like a pre-war dream that refused to wake up. "Didn't you say you needed a retreat?" Leo replied, his voice deep but curt. We are here for a few days. No more. The house manager, a thin man with an expressionless face, led them to the east room on the second floor. This room used to belong to Miss Eliza, he said, his voice monotone. She really liked the color white. The room had a strange hue. White curtains swayed gently in the wind, the old wooden floorboards creaked. A tall mirror stood in the corner of the room, reflecting everything under a dull light. On the wall, a blurred painting depicted a woman sitting by a window, her head slightly tilted, her long hair almost completely covering her face. Emma looked around the room, then her eyes instinctively stopped at the mirror. Something made the girl take a step back, not out of fear, but because of the feeling that the mirror did not reflect reality correctly. As if there was another room inside it. Sarah did not notice. She was busy unpacking, putting clothes on the shelf and sighing. The room is nice, but it's too gloomy. Leo exhaled, walked to Emma. It's okay, sweetheart. It's just an old place. That mirror too. Emma did not reply. She sat down on the edge of the bed, clutching the Milo pillow, her eyes fixed on the mirror. Outside in the hallway, a door gently creaked shut. But no one in the three noticed. No one saw that in the moment Emma bent down to tie her shoes, the mirror slightly vibrated. And for a very brief moment, the reflection in it was not 3 people, but 4. The first night at Myrtles Plantation. Everything was too quiet. The wooden clock in the hallway ticked steadily, echoing a slow ticking sound as if counting down to something no one knew the name of. In the east room, Emma Cromwell lay facing the wall, clutching the Milo pillow tightly in her hand. Sarah had turned off the lights long ago. Leo lay in the armchair by the window, his hand still holding the book he hadn't turned the second page of. Near midnight, Emma opened her eyes. Not because of a nightmare, but because of a very clear sound. A faint chuckle. Not loud, not long, but sharp and cold enough to make the girl's chest tighten. The laughter came from somewhere behind the curtain. It did not sound like her mother's voice. Certainly not her father's. Emma sat up. The Milo pillow fell to the floor. She stepped off the bed, barefoot on the icy cold wooden floor. The laughter did not echo again, but the atmosphere in the room seemed to have changed. As if someone had quietly left. Or just arrived. The mirror was still standing there, like a silent entrance. But this time, in its reflection, Emma saw something very strange. A figure. Blurred, but unmistakable. A woman in a white dress. Standing behind her, in the space between the room and imagination. The girl turned around abruptly. There was no one. Emma walked toward the mirror. The closer she got, the colder the sensation rising from the floor became. She reached out to touch the mirror, but could not touch herself. The mirror surface gently rippled, like a layer of water. A very small whisper echoed. "Do you see me?" Emma pulled her hand back. She retreated, her heart pounding like a drum. But there was no sound anymore. The mirror was silent again. And when Sarah turned on the night light because she heard footsteps, everything was back to normal. "I'm fine," Emma said. "I just sleepwalked a little." But the next morning, when Leo looked in the mirror to shave, he discovered a faint white streak like a fingerprint, clearly imprinted on the mirror surface. The fingerprint was small, slender, like that of a young woman. Although no one of the three remembered touching the mirror since yesterday. Emma said nothing. But that night, when writing in her journal, she wrote a single line. She said, "She has been waiting for me for a very long time." The next 2 nights, everything continued to pass in silence, but it was the silence of observation. Emma did not tell anyone about the whispering voice in the mirror. She was scared. Not scared of the ghost, but scared that if she told, everything would disappear. Like a strange dream that only she was invited into. On the 3rd night, when the clock struck midnight, Emma did not sleep. She sat leaning against the headboard, her eyes wide open in the darkness. The window curtain slightly swayed, although there was no wind. The air in the room became thick as curdled milk, and a faint sound echoed, this time not laughter, but a voice like a lullaby. "Do you want to play with me?" Emma did not reply. She got up, fumbling toward the window. Outside was the backyard, only dimly visible with a few tree shapes and the ground covered in mist. But between the trees was a white dress. The dress stood still, as if someone was wearing it. But the head was not visible. The hands either. Only the dress floated slightly above the ground. Then the curtain in the room opened, but only halfway. By itself. Emma stepped back. In the pale blue light filtering from outside, she saw a small footprint imprinted on the wooden floor. Wet and cold. It led from the window to the mirror. And in the mirror, Emma saw herself, not standing alone. "I will take you to see things that adults don't dare to look at." The voice echoed again. The mirror rippled again. This time, instead of cold, it emitted warmth, like an inviting arm. The girl hesitated. Her eyes looked down at the Milo pillow lying askew on the floor. The familiar feeling made Emma clench her hands. But then, a pale white hand reached out from the edge of the mirror. Not touching the ground, floating in the air. "You just need to take one step." The voice was now full of patience. Emma reached out her hand. Just then, the room door burst open. Sarah stood there, looking distraught. "Emma? What are you doing?" The mirror immediately blurred. The hand vanished. The curtain hung down as if it had never moved. Emma retreated, her eyes looking as if she had just been pulled back from another realm. "Nothing. I just couldn't sleep." Sarah did not blame her. She walked closer, hugging her daughter, her eyes still fixed on the mirror. In a very brief moment, she saw something reflected there, not Emma, but a woman. Faceless, hairless. Only an old white dress, standing right behind them. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. She sat in front of the dressing table, her eyes still stinging from lack of sleep. When she wiped the mirror to look at herself, she stopped. There was a very clear handprint on the mirror surface. It was not like a print from breath or a child's fingers. This was a slender, long handprint and completely asymmetrical with the corner of the mirror that anyone in the room could reach. It was in the middle, higher than Emma's head. Sarah shivered, but said nothing. She just quietly took a damp cloth and wiped it away. No matter how hard she wiped, the handprint reappeared when condensation gathered on the glass surface. Meanwhile, Emma sat on the bed, holding a tiny journal wrapped in floral fabric. She no longer looked panicked like in the first few days. Instead, there was silence. A strange kind of calm found only in people who have grown used to the presence of something they should not be used to. That evening, Emma wrote. She is no longer asking questions. She is telling a story. In the following nights, the conversations between Emma and her invisible friend began to become more frequent. The girl did not hear with her ears, but with her thoughts. Every time the light in the room dimmed, the mirror reflected a different scene, an old hallway, a spiral staircase, and a white dress gliding gently through the darkness. I used to have a sister. The voice narrated. But she couldn't keep a secret. And then what happened? Emma asked, not out loud, but in her head. They separated us. Locked me in the room with the mirror. There. I couldn't cry out loud. There were times Emma felt she was drifting, not through time, but through someone else's memory. A woman imprisoned in the very mirror the girl looked into every day. Sarah began to notice the change in her daughter. Emma was no longer scared, nor was she affectionate. Her eyes were more distant, and her voice was calm like an adult's. Once, when Sarah jokingly asked, "Do you want to take a walk with Mom?" Emma looked at her for a long time and said, "I don't want to go out when she is halfway through telling her story. You understand, don't you?" Sarah could not answer. She only squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to smile. But her heart was heavy. The sixth night. The crescent moon hung high, solitary against the cloudy sky. In the east room, Emma was asleep. Or so it seemed. Sarah woke up to a faint sound. A clicking sound like metal hitting glass. She sat up, looking at her daughter's bed, empty. "Emma?" There was no reply. Leo, still sleeping soundly in the chair, was roused by the light Sarah turned on. They opened the room door and saw Emma standing right at the beginning of the hallway, her back turned, her hands limp, her head slightly tilted. "Emma?" Leo called softly. The girl did not turn around. Sarah quickly walked over, placing her hand on her daughter's shoulder. It was icy cold. Emma's eyes were wide open, but they did not see them. She realized immediately, her daughter was sleepwalking. "Sweetheart, go back to bed," Sarah whispered, trying to guide her daughter back. But Emma froze. A slight smile crossed her lips, not that of a 15-year-old girl. That smile was not in the Emma they knew. Then, suddenly, the girl turned around. Ran quickly toward the room, without stopping, and with a forceful lunge, slammed her head straight into the standing mirror. The sound of shattering glass echoed chillingly. Shards of mirror flew, glinting in the pale yellow light of the ceiling lamp. Sarah screamed. Leo hugged Emma, blood flowing from the girl's forehead. But her eyes were still vacant as someone who had just been controlled by strings. Gabriel, who was sitting in the hallway downstairs at this time, no one knew he had moved back here a night ago, looked up when he heard the glass breaking. He did not run upstairs. He just closed his eyes. A soul had just taken one step closer into the world of the living. Emma was forbidden from leaving the room for 2 days after the accident. Leo still tried to maintain a scientific attitude, claiming it was just a psychological reaction, a form of teenage sleep disorder. But Sarah felt everything was beyond reason. On the evening of the 8th day, when Leo went to buy medicine and Emma was asleep, Sarah was alone in the room. She decided to organize the wardrobe, where she always felt something was wrong. Since the first day, She had not wanted to open it. The wardrobe was heavy French style, with a faded white frame and rusted brass handles. When Sarah opened the door, a musty smell rushed out. It was not the smell of wood, nor mold, but the smell of time and dried flowers. And there, in the silent void, hung a white dress. Not theirs. Not belonging to anyone in the mansion management staff ever mentioned. The dress was old, the lace sleeves were frayed, with a high collar in the style of the 19th century. It had no dust. No mold. As if it had just been hung there. Sarah reached out to touch it when a whisper echoed, very close to her ear. "She won't come back." Sarah froze. She turned around abruptly. There was no one. The dress gently swayed, as if wind was blowing from inside the wardrobe. Sarah slammed the door shut, her heart pounding, backing away until she hit the bed frame. From where she stood, she still heard a thin sound like tearing thread, coming from inside the dress. That night, Sarah did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard faint footsteps and the sound of a dress gliding across the wooden floor. Around 3 in the morning, she heard someone speaking from the wardrobe. "Don't let her wear the dress." The next morning, Sarah opened the wardrobe again. The white dress was no longer hanging in the old position. It was moved to the other corner, hanging tilted on a lower wooden hanger. At first, she thought maybe Leo had looked inside, but he completely denied it. As for Emma, when she heard her mother mention the dress, her eyes lit up in a strange way. "Is it her dress?" Emma asked. Sarah was stunned. "You know about it?" "I saw it in a dream. She told me to try it on, but it's not time yet." Sarah did not reply. She locked the wardrobe and hid the key. But that night, the dress appeared again, not in the wardrobe, but hung right above Emma's bed. As if someone had placed it there. Like a gift. Leo began to truly worry. He suggested changing rooms. But Emma fiercely resisted. The girl said, her voice icy cold, "If we move, she will be angry. And when she is angry, she cries. All night." Sarah's hands trembled as she changed the sheets. She found thin white threads, identical to the dress fibers, on the pillow, in Emma's hair, and even in the sink. On the morning of the 10th day, Emma stood in front of the mirror, holding the white dress, turning it over and over as if trying it on. "What are you doing?" Leo asked. Emma did not turn around. Her voice was dreamy. She said, "When I wear the dress, I will see what she sees. I will no longer be hidden from the truth." Sarah yanked the dress out of her daughter's hands. But when she touched it, a coldness surged through her hands, like ice water rushing through her veins. The dress fell to the floor. A gust of wind from nowhere blew strongly, making the curtain billow as if someone had just passed by. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. Emma allowed it, but did not hug back. The girl only looked over her mother's shoulder, into the void where the dress had fallen. "She doesn't like her things being touched," Emma whispered. Leo Cromwell could no longer maintain his composure. As a psychologist, he had handled hundreds of cases of identity disorder, dissociative paranoia, and multiple personalities. But what was happening to Emma was beyond every clinical model he had ever known. On the morning of the 11th day, Leo sat with Emma in the small backyard of the mansion, where there was a low vine fence and a faded wooden bench. He asked his daughter simple questions. "Do you see anything strange in your room?" Emma only smiled. "Everything is strange to adults." "Are you talking to anyone, besides Mom and Dad?" "She is always there. You don't see her because you don't believe. But me, I believe, so she talks to me." Leo swallowed hard. He no longer recognized his daughter's voice. The tone was calm, the reasoning clear, but her eyes were empty. After the conversation, Leo took extensive notes in his professional journal. He wavered between two possibilities: severe cognitive disorder or a form of collective self-hypnosis affecting Sarah as well. But deep down, he knew this thing could not be explained. That night, he placed a small camera in Emma's room. The camera recorded the entire night, and produced a video that made him drop the pen in his hand when he watched it back. Emma sat up straight at 2:33 a.m. The girl walked to the mirror, no longer broken, somehow, and stared intently at it for nearly 15 minutes. Then she started talking. Not babbling, but a dialogue, with pauses as if listening and responding. In the final frame, a very faint white streak of light passed across the lens. At the exact moment Emma turned her head and said, "I will wear it tomorrow night." Leo closed the laptop, gasping. He had never been so afraid of his daughter. Sarah knew they didn't have much time. The feeling of being watched, eavesdropped on. And the invisible touches became increasingly clear. The next morning, when Leo panicked over the video, she walked straight into Emma's room before the child woke up. Carefully, she opened the wardrobe and took out the white dress, this time not to look at it, but to end everything. She went to the backyard, set up an old metal barrel, poured gasoline into the bottom, and dropped the dress in. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. She lit the match, the fire flared up. The moment the dress caught fire, a piercing scream echoed from inside Sarah's head. No one else heard it, but it was sharp as a needle, making her fall to her knees, clutching her head, gasping for breath. It was not just a scream, but a flood of images rushing in. A spiral staircase, a hanging rope, broken mirrors, blood splashing onto a white dress, and a child's voice calling, "Sister," in the middle of the night. The fire suddenly went out. The dress was still intact. Not a single burn mark. Only damp with water. Sarah retreated. On her hands, the fingers that had held the dress just now, the skin began to peel off in small patches. Red and blistered, as if she had held boiling water. Leo ran out when he saw her collapse. But Emma stood at the second-floor window, looking down. No expression. Not a word. That night, Emma did not eat. She only sat in front of the mirror for 3 hours, silently. And around midnight, Sarah, when she woke up from her delirium, heard her daughter's voice whispering in her ear. Although Emma was clearly in another room, she said, "Mommy shouldn't have done that." Gabriel stood in front of the mirror. Not the mirror that was broken the night before, but another one, smaller, older, hanging in the auxiliary kitchen where few people frequented. He had observed long enough not to judge, certainly not to save. Gabriel was not a priest. He did not carry a crucifix, nor did he pray. He only listened, to understand where the debt lay. The mirror was blurred, not because of dust, but because of a thin layer of fog like breath from within. Gabriel exhaled, and spoke in a very faint voice. I know you are here. And I did not come to drive you away. The mirror gently vibrated. The surface cracked like water rippled by the wind. Then a figure appeared, unclear face, only the shape of a white dress, long hair, hands hanging limply. A female voice echoed, distorted, stretching every syllable as if passing through centuries. You are not like the ones before. Gabriel nodded. I don't want to erase you. I just want to know what is keeping you from leaving. Silence. Wind from the hallway blew in, extinguishing the candle on the side table. I waited for someone who knew how to listen. But no one wanted to listen to me. They only wanted to call me a demon. Then tell me, Gabriel said. Within the limits of a soul that still retains memory. The figure in the mirror tilted her head. I had a sister. She promised not to leave me. But they dragged her away. They said I was a curse. A disaster. They tied me up, used boiling water, soap, and fire, to cleanse what they did not understand. And then? I am still here. In the last dress I wore. It is soaked in blood. And it is soaked in the vow of unforgiveness. Gabriel looked at the figure. You are possessing Emma. No. The female voice whispered. Emma sees me. And I see myself again in her eyes. You are leading her down the wrong path. Or is it the only path left when no one believes in what is forgotten? Gabriel was silent. He knew, this was not just a spirit, but a fragment of resentment that had lived too long without being named. The 13th night. The drizzle enveloped the mansion like a damp shroud. The space was thick, as if all exits were sealed. Emma stood in front of the mirror, holding the white dress. No more hesitation, no more fear. Only a cold resignation. Sarah lay motionless on the bed, her body exhausted from fever and unexplained pain. Leo slumped in the library, his eyes empty. Focused on the recording he had watched dozens of times. No one knew, the time had come. Emma took off her pajamas, gently slipping her arms into the dress. The dress fit strangely well, as if tailored for her. The fabric was cold as frost, but clung tightly to her skin like a second layer of skin. As soon as the dress covered her, the room changed. The mirror began to reflect a different hallway, not the bedroom, but an ancient stone space, with red candles burning on both sides. And in the middle was a black oak door with a spiral symbol carved by hand. Emma did not move. But in the mirror, her reflection moved toward the door. With each step, a memory flashed by, fragments from Catherine's life, the sound of a whip, an iron bed, blood under her feet, and the sight of her sister being dragged away in a panic. The real room began to shake slightly. Not due to an earthquake, but as if a force from deep below wanted to emerge. Blurred figures appeared all over the walls, hundreds of small hands reaching out, grasping as if demanding recognition. Gabriel walked into the room just as the light in the mirror turned blood red. Enough, he said. Emma turned around. But the eyes were no longer hers. They were the haunted eyes of the woman who died, but was never buried. Do you want to carry the debt? Catherine's voice echoed through Emma's lips. Gabriel did not reply. He knelt down, pulled a cloth soaked in aromatic resin from his pocket, placed it in front of the mirror, and began whispering in an ancient language, not Latin, but a language only those who carry grievances understand. The mirror cracked again. But this time, instead of shattering, it expanded like a portal. And on the other side, Catherine's room appeared complete, a table, a bed, a window without glass, and another white dress lying on the ground. "You can step through," Gabriel said to the spirit. "But only if you leave Emma behind." There was no reply. But Emma began to fall. The white dress burst open as if torn from her body. And in the mirror, Catherine's figure slowly walked into her own room, without looking back. The mirror closed. Gabriel picked Emma up. The girl was breathing weakly, but alive. And the room, for the first time in 13 nights, returned to silence. The morning after the 13th night, the faint light of the new day shone into the foggy window frame. In the auxiliary kitchen, where Catherine's image once appeared, Gabriel sat opposite Leo. Both were silent for a long time. Leo was the first to speak. "What was that? Is the girl still Emma?" Gabriel looked at the cold teacup in his hand. He did not answer immediately, as if weighing his words. "She is still Emma," he replied. Only the other soul deposited a part of her memory into the girl. When the dress was removed, the bond was broken. Leo sighed, leaning back, covering his face with his hands. "I don't know what to believe anymore. I used to think I understood this world." Gabriel smiled faintly, not mockingly, but like someone who had heard that sentence many times. "You were a doctor. Now you are a father. The truth sometimes is not found in books." Leo looked up. "Who are you really, Gabriel? Why do you know these things? And why were you here, at the right time?" Gabriel placed the cup on the table. He opened the fabric pouch next to him, pulling out an old notebook, the paper yellowed. The cover engraved with a spiral pattern, identical to the symbol on the door in the mirror. "There are debts that do not belong to money. They do not belong to law. They belong to the forgotten thread of memory. When a soul is stripped of its identity, it will wander forever, unless someone else steps up to bear the unfinished promise." Leo was stunned. "You bear the debt for them?" "No," Gabriel said softly. "I bear my share. But to do that, I must listen, and remember, every story. Catherine is not the first. And certainly, not the last." A silence fell. Outside, the birds began to chirp loudly as if announcing the new day. But in Leo's heart, a layer of ashes had not dissolved. "So, is the girl safe now?" Gabriel did not answer immediately. He looked out the window, where the first rays of sunlight shone through the faint mist. "Safe," he said. "As long as no one calls Catherine's name again." Sarah woke up near noon. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtain, gentle but stinging. She felt strange in her own body, a weariness that did not come from sleep, but as if her body had been carrying something very long, very heavy. Leo sat at the foot of the bed. He held his wife's hand, his eyes reflecting relief mixed with anxiety. "You're awake." Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of suspicion. Then she spoke, her voice almost whispering. "They locked her in the well behind the stable. Not the church. They said it was so she couldn't call anyone's name anymore." Leo froze. That sentence, completely without context, but too specific. He whispered back, "Sarah, what are you saying?" Sarah seemed to be pulled out of a state of possession. She blinked continuously. What? I don't know. I dreamed, probably. But when she put her hand on her forehead, she pulled it back as if touching something scorching hot. Beneath her hair, the skin on her left temple showed a faint swollen mark in a spiral shape, identical to the symbol that had appeared in the mirror. Gabriel walked into the room at that moment. He was not surprised. He just stood still, his voice low. Catherine did not return. But her fragment has been implanted somewhere else. Leo gripped Sarah's hand tightly. What do you mean? Is she possessing Sarah? Not possession. Just remnants, Gabriel replied. Memories that do not belong to Sarah. They are finding a way to become a part of her. Sarah clenched her hands, breathing rapidly. Images flashed in her mind, a small stone room, a damp rope, a woman's voice crying all night, and a little girl standing outside afraid to step in. Sarah didn't know why she felt guilty. It's not over, is it? Leo asked. Gabriel quietly shook his head. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Cromwell house was unnaturally quiet. Emma seemed to have fully recovered. But her excessive silence worried Sarah. She did not ask about the previous night, did not mention the dress, or the sister, as if everything had been erased from her memory. But Sarah could not forget. She took Emma into the bathroom to wash her face. When she turned on the light, both of them froze. On the wall opposite the sink, where it was previously completely empty, there was now a large oval mirror, silver-framed, carved with antique patterns. The glass surface was blurred. But not from dust. It was as if there was a thin mist inside. When did this get here? Sarah mumbled. Emma stared intently at the mirror. The girl tilted her head, then smiled strangely. I think she gave it to me, so I wouldn't forget her. Sarah was startled. Which sister? The one in the mirror. Emma shrugged. She's not scary, Mom. She's just sad. Sarah felt a cold chill down her spine. She turned toward Emma, then looked in the mirror. In a fleeting moment, a figure stood right behind the girl. Not Sarah. Not Leo. Only for a split second. Then disappeared. That evening, Leo checked throughout the house. When he shone the flashlight on the back of the bathroom wall, there was nothing. The wall was smooth, with no actual mirror. Gabriel walked up from the basement at midnight. She is still searching, he said to Leo. Searching for what? The right mirror to not reflect, but to store. In the following 3 days, Emma became obsessed with colored pencils. She no longer talked to her parents or played with stuffed animals like before. Instead, she sat confined in her room, drawing continuously, picture after picture, sometimes not even stopping to eat. Initially, Leo thought it was just post-traumatic stress. But by the 13th drawing, he began to notice. None of the drawings were random. They were pieces of a puzzle, a brick hallway, a hand reaching out from a ventilation window, a rusty gate with a spiral pattern, dry well shafts. And in the middle of everything, there was always a girl in a white dress, standing with her back turned, her head bowed. Sarah was most stunned when she saw a final drawing. It was the empty lot behind the mansion, where only tall weeds and a decaying fence remained. But in the drawing, the lot had an octagonal stone well, surrounded by 3 charred wooden poles, and a rotten wooden sign with only the words, Atherine, visible. Sarah gasped. That place used to have an old stable. But it collapsed when my great-grandparents were alive. Gabriel stood behind, nodding slightly. And that well, is where the final vow was sealed. She doesn't want forgiveness. She wants to be remembered. In the most painful form. Leo clenched the drawing in his hand. So if we dig it up? Gabriel interrupted, no. Not to break the spell. But to face it. If you don't dare to look at the place where Catherine rests, then all the mirrors in the house will turn into doors. That night, the backyard of the Cromwell mansion was illuminated by flashlights and oil lamps. Gabriel, Leo, and Sarah, each carrying a different fear, walked toward the area Emma had drawn. Emma was left in the house, sleeping soundly after taking a sedative. But even in her sleep, her hand was clenched as if holding something invisible. Gabriel was the first to hold the pickaxe. He did not hesitate, did not say a word, just dug into the cold, damp, and musty soil. After nearly an hour, the pickaxe hit something solid. Not bone. Not stone. A metal box about 40 centimeters long, partly corroded, but still intact. On the lid, what made all three of them step back was long locks of ash-brown hair, braided into a sealing knot. Sarah put her hand to her mouth. Oh my God! Gabriel gently removed the locks of hair as if undoing a burial ritual. The box creaked as it opened. Inside were 3 items. A piece of white dress fabric, still smelling of pine resin, a parchment scroll recording a confession in a trembling hand, and finally, a teardrop-shaped mirror shard, broken. Leo held the scroll. It was the confession of Catherine's sister, who had remained silent when her sister was accused and burned alive. The writing was filled with torment. I cannot forgive myself. If someone finds this box one day, please remember my sister's name. She doesn't need justice. She needs to be recognized as having lived and loved. Gabriel closed his eyes. This is the real vow. Catherine is not cursing us. It is the very guilt that imprisoned her soul in a form of grievance. Sarah looked at the mirror shard. It reflected not her face, but Emma, standing in the room. Eyes open, looking toward the lot as if knowing exactly what they were doing. The night after the excavation, the entire Cromwell mansion seemed to be suspended in a state of limbo. No one mentioned the box, nor did anyone discuss what to do next. Gabriel sat alone in the library, the dim light casting shadows on his old face like a stone statue. Then, at 2:03 a.m., the mirror in the living room shattered without anyone touching it. 1 minute later, the mirror in the kitchen. Then the bathroom upstairs. Every 30 seconds, a mirror cracked. Then shattered, leaving behind shards of shimmering glass, and in the middle of each broken piece, were the eyes of a woman, not crying, not angry, just watching. Sarah ran upstairs. She screamed for Emma, but the girl was still asleep, not moving. On the wall next to her bed, moonlight shone through the window onto the last drawing, the only one Emma used red color in. The painting showed a woman in a white dress standing amidst a pile of broken mirrors, her hand raised forward, whispering, "I don't want to be forgiven. I want to be called by name." Gabriel walked in at that moment. He looked at the painting, then spoke in a voice like someone who had foreseen every event. "She is demanding the right to exist. Not as a vengeful spirit, but as a part of human memory." Leo stood behind, almost whispering, "If we do that, acknowledge her as a part of history, will it end?" Gabriel did not reply. He looked down at his hand, where there was now a small cut bleeding, although no one saw him injured. The last mirror, the mirror in Catherine's mother's room years ago, began to vibrate slightly. The last mirror began to vibrate violently as if about to explode. The space around it blurred as if distorted by something that did not belong to this world. Gabriel placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, his voice solemn but urgent. "You must call her name. But not with fear. With recognition." Sarah trembled and nodded. She took Emma's hand, leading her in front of the mirror. The mother and daughter faced their reflections, but behind them was a girl in a white dress, her head bowed, her hands stained with blood, and her eyes pleading. Emma uttered the first word, very softly. "Catherine." Sarah continued, this time clearly and decisively. "Catherine Ashwood. You are not forgotten. You are seen, known, and called by name." The mirror immediately stopped vibrating. Catherine's image lifted her head, her eyes seemingly brightened for a moment, then turned calm. Gabriel stepped up. He touched the glass surface, but his hand did not stop there. It passed through like water. The light from the mirror gradually enveloped him, and when he turned his head to look at Sarah, he said only one sentence. "This is the last debt." He stepped inside, completely vanishing. Catherine's image also faded in that light. The last mirror cracked, then cracked further, then dissolved into glass sand, falling silently to the floor, without a sound. At the same time, throughout the mansion, no mirror reflected anything anymore. All had become blurred glass. The Cromwell mansion passed through 3 quiet weeks. Too quiet. No more whispering sounds. No more vague footsteps. But also no more of Emma's morning laughter, or Sarah's gentle reminders at dusk. All the mirrors in the house were replaced by blurred glass, exactly as it had left them. Leo, although initially trying to install new mirrors, gave up when he found that every time he replaced a mirror, the reflection was only an empty room. Sarah arranged flowers. Emma colored. Everything happened as if nothing had happened. But everyone in the family understood, what happened did not leave a wound, but left a void. Emma no longer drew Catherine. But when Sarah cleaned her daughter's room, she found a stack of papers hidden under the pillow. In it was a drawing of Gabriel, standing in front of a mirror, his back turned to the viewer. And in the corner of the drawing was a scrawled line in red pencil. He didn't disappear. He just stepped into a place we can no longer see. Leo now often sat for hours on the porch. He was no longer angry, nor afraid. He kept a small notebook with him, where he began recording the story of Catherine Ashwood, not as a warning, but as a memorial testimony. Gabriel did not return. But from the southern swamp area, local residents began sharing stories about a strange man appearing in the bedroom mirror of an elderly woman who was about to pass away, helping her see her late husband one last time. Sarah heard the news, only smiled. "We didn't lose him. We just no longer owe a debt." Section 2. The book is published, and mirrors at the museum begin to reflect incorrectly. Half a year later, Leo's book was published. The title was simple. The Woman in the Mirror, The True Story of Catherine Ashwood and the Dead of the Living. Not sensational, not calling for revenge. Only a record of the entire event, from Emma's first glance in the white dress, to the moment Gabriel stepped into the mirror and never returned. The book caused a slight stir in the world of occult academia, but to the public, it was just a haunting and sad work. Some praised it, some doubted it, others viewed it as a fictional novel. 3 months after its release, the Town History Museum organized an exhibition, The Forgotten Mirrors, a section inspired by the last chapter of Leo's book. In exhibition room number 4, they placed an antique mirror found from an abandoned house near the swamp. The mirror was not polished, the glass surface had faint gray bubbles. In front of the mirror was a small information plaque that read, "A mirror that does not reflect is a mirror that is not forgotten. Try looking into it and calling a name you are not sure you remember." Initially it was just a novelty. But on the 4th day of the exhibition, security reported that the surveillance camera recorded someone standing in front of the mirror at midnight, even though the door was locked. When reviewing the footage, a black-robed shadow was seen standing opposite the mirror, its hand placed on the glass, and behind the shadow was the image of a girl in a white dress. The next morning, the crowd rushing to room number 4 increased dramatically. People said that if you stood at the exact moment of sunset reflecting into it, you would see in the mirror the face of someone you had forgotten, but who had never disappeared. Leo's book was republished. And Emma, now older, began drawing again, but this time of rooms without people, silent mirrors, and on the other side, no longer Catherine's shadow, but herself. And that is all that remains, not a ghost story to scare, but the whisper of memories that have not been named. We always think ghosts come from outside. But sometimes, the most terrifying things are the ones buried deep inside, the apologies never said, the names erased from history, the eyes that were never truly seen. Catherine did not haunt anyone. She only reclaimed her place in the memory of the living. And Gabriel was not an exorcist. He was the one who carried memory across the boundary of oblivion, in exchange for a little late justice. If you ever stand in front of a mirror, see yourself unclear, see something moving behind you, do not quickly turn away. You might have just touched an untold story. And if you remember Catherine, do not whisper. Call her name clearly, in the way that the truth always demands to be seen.